Hey, how's it going? So this is going to be part one of three. We're going to be talking about the animus today. You might be wondering why we're talking Jungian psychology, but there's a reason for that. We've been doing the soul. That's what we've been talking about on this channel for the last 2 months or so. I've never been interested in what the actual soul is or any of that kind of thing. It's never really bothered me. But when I engage with atheists, especially back when streams was still a thing. Almost every other week, someone would bring up the soul. So I set up a reading project for this year, going through all the major theological topics and reading the main writer who wrote the core piece that we use for our modern understanding of a certain theological issue. I've read through the church fathers, and so I picked certain later church doctors that I thought would be theologically relevant to these topics. 52 books in total. Streams is now defunct. So I'm now speaking to an audience of one, myself. Doesn't matter. Hopefully you come along for the ride. So we started off with Aristotle's The Anima, and we got a definition of what the soul is not. Then we get to Augustine and his arguments against heresies that had come up about the way that people thought of the soul. Basically, a lot of heresies had come up, and as these heresies were defined, it ends up having implications for certain common ideas about the soul and about what it is to go through the process of theosis. So it discounts a lot of the Eastern theology and even Eastern mythicism, not just of Greek origin, but also of Persian and even later Eastern origins. And that's it. That's it for the development. Thomas Aquinas and Augustine basically kill any motion that was going forward on the understanding of the soul. And so once you get to the Enlightenment and you get to kind of the rebirth of atheism, especially with Nietzsche, then you get to existentialism, especially post-Kierkegaard. And Kierkegaard does have some additional post-scientific scripts about the soul. You're wondering why I'm smiling? It's because that's the name of the book that talks about the soul. But it's not a lot. It's not like he's doing a deep dive. And then you get a lot of pop science and pop theology and a lot of occult and esoteric ideas that don't really originate from any source that they're citing. You get a lot of bad mythos around the soul, from popular entertainment, everything from Paradise Lost to Dante, to other types of fictions like Faust, and eventually you'll get to modern fictions and modern Hollywood takes on what the soul is. And they're all wrong. The soul is not an angel, none of that kind of crap. When you die, you don't become an angel. Anyway, that being the case, the soul doesn't really get any development in its understanding until you get to Jung. The Jungian archetypes, the idea of the Hegelian world soul, or world spirit, which again pulls back to Aristotle. But you get this really great development happening in a secular sense where the soul becomes representative of certain aspects of the psyche. So you have the yin and yang in Eastern contexts, the male and the female parts of an individual. This is not sex. If you wanted to use modern context, it would be more like gender. But every single person has a male and a female aspect to themselves. And the male part would be the more dominant in the male, in the man, and the female aspect would be more dominant in the female. But to ignore the male aspect in the female is to be unbalanced, and to ignore the female aspect in the male is to be unbalanced, and it leads to psychological ills. And the way that you can figure out what the archetype that you should be mirroring or you should be measuring yourself against, because it is this ethereal thing, is dependent on the culture that you're in. So how the culture defines male and female, and there's a global understanding and there's a local understanding. So the spirit that resides in you has both a male and female side. It is ungendered, but that does not mean that it is non-binary. It has a male and female aspect. And so what Jung and what Emily Jung, that's this one right there, what that's talking about, especially in the first essay of hers, is how for the female, how that imbalance affects the female persona. So if you're engaged in over masculine tendencies to the point that you're ignoring your feminine tendencies, your femininity will then psychologically attack you and make you interact with your masculine side improperly. On the other hand, if you let your masculine side dominate you, you will lose certain aspects of your femininity, which is another type of social sickness or psychological sickness that's going on. So you need to have this good balance, and it's only proper that a feminine woman have a little bit more femininity to her than masculinity. That doesn't mean that you don't want to have almost an equal amount, but you don't want to be perfectly equal, because perfect equilibrium is death. You want that cycle to be moving. You want the wheel to be turning. And again, for the male, you want, as a male, you would want to embrace your masculine side. You want to find peace with your masculinity. But at the same time, you don't want to ignore your feminine side to where it's all masculine and then you're unhealthy. And you don't want a perfect balance where there's no motion, because then you're dead. So when it comes to the animus, there's the animus as understood by the male, which would be male archetypes that men look to just to see if they're being masculine or if they're acting in a certain way. And there's an internal motion through hormones and through biology and through your own psychology that develops as you grow, as your mind develops, that is going to produce a man. And whatever you are, if you're male and you're psychologically healthy, that is what a man is. There's no like one definition of man, like there's no one definition of female, but you compare your psychological development to a healthy male that's kind of an idealized healthy male. Now, because you have an internal push, an internal system pushing you to your attractions, pushing you towards your inclinations, the male persona is going to develop whether it's healthy or not if you're biologically male. And so it's your job to tame it and to control it and to use it properly. In the female, it's different. So with the male, you will have an idealized female, sometimes personified as an individual. This could be your first love, your first crush. It could be your mother. Think of any Oedipal issues that you would get from Freudian psychology. So these kind of archetypes become the archetypal women for the men. They're not based on a real woman. They're simply representatives of women. That's why when you watch a movie written about a woman, but it's written by a man, the females will have more male type behavior. It's simply because the male is basing their feminine archetype based on what they wish a woman was, not based on what an actual woman is. So a lot of times younger men will build up a fantasy woman, and that fantasy woman, they'll put the face of the person they're attracted to, but they're building up an idol. They're building up a false person. That fantasy version of that woman is not the real person who they're interacting with and they're trying to pursue. In Jungian archetypes here, this world soul, this idea, this absolute idea of human, which has now been subdivided into male and female. When it comes to the female understanding, it's not an individual male that they're looking at, but a patriarchy. They're looking at a group of men, a group of sages, wise men. So man, from the female perspective, is actually a group of men. And these different masculine archetypes are not based on real men, though they can be influenced by real men in their life. They're based on their understanding of these group of men and how these men interact with each other. So for the Jungian understanding of the female animus, the male side of the female, that is going to be based on how they see men act in groups. And they can misinterpret the immature male who they know in real life, who acts in a group immaturely, as male behaviors that are archetypical of a man, when they're actually looking at the archetypes of a boy or a teenager, of a developing man who has not yet found that balance within themselves. They're basing their understanding of their own masculine tendencies on the improper, unbalanced actions of men they knew growing up, which were actually boys. So the idea is for the male aspect of the female soul to become healthy by learning to identify how individual men actually behave and taking healthy activities of mature, healthy men and having that replace or influence their understanding of their own masculine tendency. Again, we're talking about the soul, and we're talking about the soul as psyche, and then we're dividing that up into two aspects, the animus and the anima, the yin and the yang, the male and the female aspects of the self. And this can be seen as dominant and submissive. This does not mean that all women are submissive or all men are dominant. There are feminine men and masculine women. That's not what this is talking about. This is talking about the psychology, the soul, the consciousness of the individual. And this individual development is influenced by the social constructs that are around you. And the civilization that you're in, the entertainment that you consume, influences your understanding of male and female and can lead to toxic mixes, toxic brews in that cocktail that is your personality. So that is how the development of the soul has now come to represent the consciousness. And if you ever engage with someone like Jimmy Akin, he will go away from the idea of anima as the energy that animates the body. He'll walk away from the Aristotelian understanding of the soul and try to use an Thomistic or Augustinian negative definition to say what the soul is not. And that really limits the progress that has happened in the rest of the world, such as in Greek mysticism and in Eastern mysticism, such as in Buddhism, such as in psychology and sociology when it comes to Western psychology and sociology and psychiatry as well. So he has to deny a lot of progress that has been made in the understanding of the soul to embrace his strict definition of soul as consciousness. But the idea of soul as consciousness, as your inner self, there are problems there. Because what happens when someone has brain damage and their personality changes? Well, if your consciousness, if your personality is your soul, and the soul is supposed to be unchanging based on this Thomistic idea, based on this Augustinian idea, then that shows that assumption is wrong. On the other hand, if the soul can develop and change, as is stated in Eastern mysticism and in Eastern theology, Greek theology, and in East Asian understandings of the soul and development, well, then it makes perfect sense that your personality could change when you're damaged, that your experiences in life do help develop your soul and your personality. So there is a problem there when it comes to Western and Eastern understandings of the soul, and they are expressed very explicitly when you switch the mode of understanding to a secular psychological point of view. All right, this is part one. I hope that was interesting. Again, this was just pontificating. I'm going to talk about the anima next time, and then I'm going to put it all together in hopefully in a third video. All right, talk to you all later.